In this video, we are going to be talking about some different off-road gear you might take with you on the trail. Now, as a disclaimer, you have to understand that some of this gear does have with it inherent risk, and you need to be aware of that, and you need to be trained on how to use this equipment so you can do it safely. So I highly encourage you to look up some training, go to the International Four-Wheel Drive Trainers Association online, the I4WDTA, and find a trainer in your area. Hey, welcome back everybody to The Right Line. I'm here in beautiful northern Arizona, just south of Flagstaff. And if you're watching this video, it means you decided to join The Right Line in one of my memberships. So new to The Right Line are two memberships. One, the first membership will get you early access to all my content on the channel. The second membership for my channel has to do with a gear and off-road instructional membership. And if you're watching this video, it means you've already joined. So thank you very much. In this video, we're going to get started on some sort of entry-level off-roading information. You cannot go off-roading or drive anywhere else without your seatbelt. And that should be the number one. That should be the first thing you do when you get into vehicles, put your seatbelt on. If the seatbelt is on, you still want to make sure that you've got access to all of your controls inside the vehicle and buttons so you don't have to reach too far forward to get to them. So in my case, sway bar button, locker button, and all of my traction control buttons and hazards over here, not to mention my shifters. I want to have access to all of those things. All right, so the nerdy physical therapist in me is going to come out for this first tip, and that is just seating in the front of your vehicle. Now, if you've been at work for a while, you've probably had some ergonomic instructors at work that kind of talked about how you're going to make yourself the most productive at work by your position at your desk in the most ergonomic position. And some of that has to do with hips and knees at 90 degrees so you're comfortable, full upright posture and position. Hands on the steering wheel at, let's say, 9 and 3 or 10 and 2. I prefer like 8:30. That's kind of comfortable for me. No thumbs inside the steering wheel. You want to keep those out just about like this. Elbows down at your side where you have the most stability, because obviously if you have your arms out straight like this for too long, they're going to get tired, especially in the off-road situation. All right, so the nerdy physical therapist of me is going to tell you that if you have good proximal strength from here to here, that means the distal use of your extremities is going to be better. And some of that can be best illustrated down here at your feet. Right heel should be planted on the floorboard. The gas pedal should be situated right underneath the ball of my foot. And in some cases, you can rest the lateral side of your foot up against the transmission tunnel for better support. That way I have good use of this foot in the sagittal plane, or basically up and down motion, to operate the gas pedal. Now, comparatively, if you're holding your foot up and you don't have your foot on the floor, just trying to hold your foot up and operate the pedals, well, that's going to get tiring. So if you leave the heel down and you can operate the pedal with the ball of your foot, it's going to be much better in the long run for your endurance off-road. In your seated position, another super important thing is to make sure that you have good awareness of what's around you visually, and that's going to include your side mirrors and your rear view mirrors, making sure that you've got good view right behind you, and then with your mirrors to the side of the vehicle, whatever's comfortable for you, but you need to have good 360 degree, as best you can anyway, situational awareness of what's going on around you. Also, hands at, I like 8:30, but let's say 9 and 3 here. Okay, no thumbs inside the steering wheel. We mentioned that earlier. And then also, when turning the wheel, we're shuffle steering. My elbows are still down at my sides, so I've got good stability in my arms. I'm not going to fatigue out, and I can shuffle the wheel from right to left just by shuffling, as compared to hand over hand. We want to avoid that. Now, if my seat back is not in the best position and I'm reclined too far, number one, I'm not going to have access to some of the buttons that I need. Number two, I'm not going to have good visibility through all of my windows when I'm off-roading. And also, if I am going to look over the steering wheel, I'm going to have to pull myself forward away from the seat, and we don't want that either. So, we're going to raise this seat back up to a comfortable position where my back is supported and my hips are close to that 90 degrees that we mentioned earlier. You want to be super comfortable, but you still want to have awareness of what's going on around you. All right, so the next part of this video is just a brief overview or suggestions of some of the equipment that you can take with you on the trail. Now, this is by no means a complete list, because you might have a number of other things that you want to take with you. But before we go into any of this equipment, I have to mention one thing, and that is everything we do, especially off-road or even just driving to work, is full of risk. And you assume some of that risk just getting up in the morning, getting dressed, and heading to work. So we're going to be talking about some equipment here, and this equipment, make sure, number one, you got to know, use any of this equipment at your own risk, but to mitigate some of that risk, get some training. Find a trainer, look up the International Four-Wheel Drive Trainers Association online, find a trainer that's close to you, and inquire about some training classes. We're going to cover some of the gear that I pack into my two-door JK. Now, a lot of folks tease me that I should get the award for packing the most amount of crap into a two-door JK. And some of the stuff that I've laid out here on my tarp is just a brief little summary of some of the things I carry. There's more in there that I didn't bring up, but I want to talk about some really important things. And in really no particular order, there are some really important things that you should have with you on the trail. Namely, the first thing is a first aid kit. Okay, now there are a whole bunch of first aid kits out on the market, and there's a lot of specialty first aid kits out on the market. And depending on your training and what kind of medical equipment that you are familiar with, you can choose accordingly. This one I picked up at Sportsman's Warehouse, and it's just a very small kit. It's easy to put into the Jeep. It's very compact, and it has some very basic first aid kit stuff in here. This one, believe it or not, is actually a little more full, and it's from Amazon. I don't remember how much this one cost, but it's got a little bit more equipment in here. Now, the one thing I should say about first aid kits and just help in general is it's not if you're going to run into an emergency off on the trail, it's when. And a couple things that you should know about before rendering aid. Okay, number one, scene safety is number one. That's paramount, making sure that it is a safe situation to enter. Number two, making sure that before you treat anybody, you always have to ask for consent. Now, if it's an adult, they can give you consent. If it's a child under the age of 18, you need to get the parent's consent. Now, of course, there are some situations where, consent is sort of implied. For example, if you run up on a scene and somebody has an arterial bleed, I would say, don't necessarily worry about consent. Put a hand on that with some direct pressure first. Now, these first aid kits are not going to be any good to you at all unless A, you're familiar with what's in it, and B, you know how to use it. In your area, there is always some kind of a wilderness first aid or a first aid class being held. Find a class, get trained on how to use some of this first aid equipment, and maybe you can help somebody. Next on the list is a fire extinguisher. You should always have a fire extinguisher in your vehicle. I generally carry two. This one is situated in the back passenger side corner of my JK because if I'm camping, I'm cooking off of the tailgate, so I have a fire extinguisher there ready to go. My second fire extinguisher is attached to the passenger side roll bar behind the passenger side seat, and it is within my reach from my driver's seat. I can reach over, undo the Velcro straps, pull it out, jump out of the Jeep, and I'm ready to go with a fire extinguisher. You should always have a pair of gloves in your vehicle, whether you're doing a recovery, whether you're setting up your tent, whether you're changing a tire, whatever. Have a pair of gloves, protect your hands. You don't want to end up with an injury on your hands. Whether or not you're on a day trip or an overnighter or an overlanding trip or what have you, plan accordingly with food, snacks, and water. When I go off-road, I always generally carry at least either a case of water or 5 gallons of water, and I'll always carry snacks. Whatever you need, snacks for your personal diet, take those with you. Plan accordingly, and it's not a bad idea to take extra just in case something happens on the trail and you end up needing to stay there just a little bit longer. Now, off-road, you're probably going to want to consider to air down your tires. Airing down your tires are going to do several things for you. One, it's going to make your ride a little bit more tolerable because of a little bit more of a compliant tire. Also, airing down your tires is going to change the footprint of your tire, lengthening the footprint of the tire, giving your tire more traction, better compliance to the surface, and again, a more comfortable ride. It is not a question of if, but rather when you are going to have to do a tire repair. This is the kit that I carry. This kit is made by ARB. There's lots of kits out there. You can get basic kits at any auto parts store that include the tire plug and auger part and then the plugs. But having a tire repair kit in your vehicle is a great idea, whether it be plugs or patches or what have you. It's always a good idea to have some tools so you can be a little bit more self-reliant on the trail and repair those tires when needed. Having all this tire repair kit stuff is no good if you can't air up your tires. In this case, this is the Moreflate compressor that I carry. I've tried a whole bunch of different ones. There's a million different options for you to air up your tires, whether it be a compressor like this, whether it be any number of brands, or a CO2 tank or onboard air. Having a compressor to air up your tires is really important. There may be a time that that tire is not going to be repairable. Now, I've been known to stick like 6, 8, 10, 12 plugs in the sidewall of a tire because I'm stubborn. But in some case, you're going to have to change that tire. Now, whether you're using the factory jack that came with your vehicle or you're upgrading to something like this, you got to have a jack. Once we start updating our suspensions and we start putting bigger tires on, that factory jack is just not going to cover it anymore. The one in my Jeep is long gone. This is the bottle jack that I've carried for years. This bottle jack has been in almost all the Jeeps I've ever had. I've used this bottle jack to change tires, and I've used it for some simple repairs on the trail. A couple things about bottle jacks though. Number one, when you put a bottle jack on the axle tube, you're only really getting about 1/4 of an inch of contact with the top of this jack to the bottom of the axle tube, which can make the jack kind of unstable. So when at the Overland Expo, I found one of these. It basically sits on the top of the bottle jack and it cradles the axle tube, making a more stable situation when you're trying to lift the vehicle. I also carry this high lift jack. This high lift jack has been with me for years. But one thing a high lift jack should not be used for, by itself anyway, is changing a tire. Now you're going to need something to take that tire off and loosen those lug nuts. I carry a breaker bar, number one. I used to carry a tire iron. Don't carry that anymore. I also carry an electric impact. Now, can you get the job done with something else? Yes, of course you can. This is maybe a luxury item. It's a convenience item. But now with more and more how the electronics are leaps and bounds much better than they used to be, more and more people are carrying electric impacts to change the tires and do repair work on the trail. Breaker bar is really great. I've carried this for a long time and I've used this for several repairs on the trail. The factory tire iron that I had once before, long gone. Now with the advent of navigation today, everybody is using OnX, Backcountry Navigator, Gaia, or what have you. And admittedly, I've used all of them, but nothing can compete with good old paper map. I carry a whole bunch of paper maps. I've kind of collected these over the years. I've had a little selection of notes that I've made on different things. A lot of these maps are going to be location specific. Coconino National Forest, this is the motor vehicle use map. These are the maps that you're looking for, the motor vehicle use maps. These will include all of the approved routes in the area that you're going, because if the electronics fail, you need to have a backup. Tools are another really important thing you want to take on the trail, and if you're really got a lot of room, you could take a whole toolbox with you. This is just a small selection of some of the stuff that I carry. I didn't bring everything out, but really important things to have are a good selection of combination wrenches, a good selection of sockets, and some of this stuff here. Now, again, you could take a whole tool chest with this kind of stuff, and you could overdo it and you can carry a lot of tools. So just kind of be vehicle specific, and if you've been around tools for a little bit, you kind of get an idea of what you really prefer to take. The other thing that's really important is different brands, different vehicle manufacturers will have very specific things that you should carry. For example, for you JK owners, TJ owners, XJ owners, LJ owners, YJ owners, you name it, a couple sockets you gotta have. 13mm 12-point socket and a 36mm socket. Without those two, you're not doing any front-end repair work. A lot of what we've been talking about so far is basically just a brief summary of some things that I think are really important to take on the trail. We could spend hours talking about some of this gear. But what's really important is that you have a good selection of stuff that you're familiar with and you know how to use. And the same could be said for recovery gear. You could probably load your vehicle up till you have no more suspension travel with gear. But a couple things that are really, really important that you should know about recovery gear. Number one, whether you're using steel or whether you're using synthetic line, making sure that you have the right gear for those pieces of equipment is super important. The recovery gear industry as it relates to our hobby is just saturated and just full of different recovery gear manufacturers out on the market. Some of them are good, some of them sadly are not so good. But one thing that you should know about recovery gear is if it does not have a label on it, if it does not have ratings on it, it is not a piece of equipment that you want to buy. Recovery gear, just like anything else that we talked about, involves knowing how to use it and getting trained. You want to know how to use this stuff. You want to know what the limitations of this stuff is. You want to learn how to be able to do vehicle resistance calculations. You want to know how to do stuck assessments. There's a lot that goes into it. But again, getting good equipment that has a label and knowing how to use it is paramount. Again, I can't stress this enough. Go to the I4WDTA's website, look for a trainer in your area, and get some training on how to use this stuff. Thank you so much for watching this video, and if you are watching this video, what it means is that you have decided to join the right line at this membership level. The purpose of this membership, for me anyway, is to bring to you every month some gear and off-road training material only for you as a member. If you like what you saw, please spread the word to your friends about this exclusive training content only available on the Right Line membership channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again on the next one.